Hello everyone, this is Austin at Bates Nursery. We're here for another segment of the Bates Botanical Bootcamp, and today we're talking about trees. Now trees it's a pretty broad topic, so hopefully I can answer some of your questions here. I'm actually on the nursery today. We're pre-recording this because we're a little busy out here today, so I'm actually on our tree lot right now and gonna go over some trees with you. So when you first come out here and you come to our tree lot, you're first going to approach our fruit trees, which I'm kind of standing next to right now. These are obviously the fruit. This one here is a pear. A lot of different fruit trees. I will say our fruit tree selection is fairly limited because everybody's decided they wanted to grow their own food. So fruit trees, we're a little picked over right now. Got a lot of pear, I got a fair amount of apple. I don't have a lot of peaches right now. They've been super popular. One thing we need to talk about with fruit trees is that for the most part you need pollinators, so you can't just buy one fruit tree. If you're buying apples or pears or plums, you need to buy at least a couple different varieties, different cultivars to cross-pollinate with each other to produce fruit. I think the reason why we don't have any peaches right now is because they're a self-fertile tree. You only need one to produce fruit. So that's a good one to have if you have a small space. It's a fairly small tree and you can put it in the yard and just one will do to create fruit. A lot of different fruit out here. And like I said, this is just kind of the first area that you come to whenever you first see the tree lot. As we work into the tree lot, you start to see other varieties of plants. So what we've tried to do here at Bates is get a little native section going. So we've got our little native plants here. They're mostly small. It's a lot of kind of what we would say woods trees. These were grown up north, so they haven't quite started leafing out yet. Some of them have, but most of them are still dormant. Talking about some of our, we got some hickory in here. We got some lindera in here, which is a small growing, not necessarily tree, more of a woody shrub, but it's good for the butterflies. All sorts really. We've got little lindens in here, which is a good little tree, nice little native, good for the bees. We've got a number of small native trees, which is in this section right here. So as we work further into the tree lot, we get into some 5-gallon material, which is about as small as we sell. That's in these size pots right here, fairly young trees, but we've had them for a minute, so they're all starting to leaf out. Got some nice crab apples right now, right here. Crab apple's a nice, small growing, flowering tree in the spring. You've probably seen these around town right now. Most of them are pretty well lit up with mainly white blooms and some of them pink. But it's a pretty fast growing tree if you wanted to start small. There's a number of trees I wouldn't recommend starting small because they grow so slow, dogwood being one of those. But crabapple is one where you can start pretty small and get a fairly large tree within just a few growing seasons. So nice little flowering tree, crabapple I do recommend, a good little plant. Since I had mentioned dogwood, they are for sure blooming around town right now. I know you've seen those, mainly white, but there's a lot of pink varieties as well. We sell the full out of dogwood. We can't even barely keep it in stock here. Let me see if I can find you one. These are actually some little bitty 2-gallon dogwood. That's a pink dogwood there. And this is about as small as we would ever sell. Now, like I said, if you are young and you got time to wait and you are on a budget, you can buy a small dogwood, but you're going to be waiting a long time before you see a tree, you know, a nice sized tree. So if you wanted to, go ahead and maybe spend some more money on a dogwood to get a bigger one because, like I said, they are pretty slow growing plants. Dogwoods are truly native here. You've seen them in the woods. They can grow in shady environments or sunny environments. And typically you'll get a bigger dogwood, a bigger, more open dogwood if they're grown in the shade. If you put them in the sun, they'll grow a little bit tighter and they'll be a little bit more full. But dogwood's just a real classic here for us, growing along the sides of the interstate and all that. Another plant that grows along the sides of the interstate that's truly native here is going to be our native red buds. So this one right here is a red bud. This is a weeping variety. Called Ruby Falls. Ruby Falls has been a pretty popular one. It's got purple foliage. It's just starting to emerge, if you can see that right there. And beautiful purple leaf that's very small right now. That's going to swell to about probably 5 times that size and be a heart-shaped leaf. But it's got this beautiful spring show as well. They call them red buds. I think that's kind of funny. They're more purple than they are red. But this whole plant Really pretty, and this is going to have a cascading effect that's going to just fill down this whole plant. The weeping redbuds have been very popular. But we also sell just regular redbud, which is just our eastern redbud, which is a Cercis canadensis is the botanical name. And they're just another kind of medium to small growing tree, about a 20 to 30 footer at maturity, and fairly quick. I wouldn't say it's the fastest growing plant on earth, but it's moderate growing. So it's another true native that you can't really hurt. You know, once you stick it out there and it gets latched in, it's going to live for years and years and produce blooms year after year without a problem. Another one that we need to talk about is probably our spring blooming cherries, specifically Yoshino cherry, which I don't believe I've got one right now because they are so popular. They were blooming about 2 weeks ago. They were in full show, and they are pink in their bud whenever they're just in their bud phase, and then they open to a true white, and that's Yoshino that I'm talking about. There are other varieties of cherry, one called Kwanzan. I think I've got one down here. And you've noticed these probably around town because they are truly double pink blooms. Really, really showy. One thing we need to talk about is that Yoshino cherry and most of the cherries are going to bloom early in the spring before they leaf out. So that's why they're so showy, and that's why we see them so much, is because Yoshino cherry has just loaded white blooms all over this tree with no leaves behind it. So what you see is just all flower power and no leaves to get in the way. So that's why they're so showy. Kwanzan cherry does not do that. It will leaf out at pretty much the same time as it's blooming. So it's a little bit different look, still very, very showy though. Let me see if I can get in here. I thought I had one left. Yeah, here's one. Let's get off in here. These, by the way, are weeping cherries. That's another, while I'm standing here, these have been real popular. These have a weeping effect. Still beautiful white blooms with leaves just behind them. These are just about to be finished up blooming for the season. But they were, last week, they were just lit up. I mean, beautiful white all the way down. I get questions a lot about weeping cherry, by the way, while I'm here, and like how big they're going to get. It's kind of funny. Every weeping cherry I've ever seen has been more or less different. They all kind of take their own habit. For the most part, you're going to get a weeping effect, and what you're going to see is the width change much more than the height. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes a weeping cherry does funny things. It'll take a stem and it'll shoot way up and wanting to be more or less a tall tree. If you don't cut that out, then that plant's going to go up like that, and then it's going to have stems that weep back down over top of it. So you can get a lot of different height change. But for the most part, what you're going to see is a difference in width rather than the height. So cool plant. It's the one that you can put fairly close to your home in a small bed, put it dead center of a bed, and then build around it. Really, really pretty plant in the spring. Let's get back to this Kwanzan though. I want you to see it. Move it a little bit. Tyler, you get this? This is Kwanzan. K-W-A-N-Z-A-N, Kwanzan cherry, and what you see is this beautiful, just double pink bloom on it that is so showy. Great for lining, say, a driveway. These are small trees, but very, very almost perfect in their habit. They add a very single stem to a round canopy lollipop style tree. So if you wanted to like line your driveway or just a pretty little front yard tree, this would be a great one to use for that. It's a very hardy tree, holds its leaves a little bit longer than most cherries in the fall. Which is not a problem, but it's a thing that we have to deal with cherries, is that when they're late into the summer, as they start approaching fall, they tend to drop their leaves quicker than most other trees do. They don't have a great fall color usually, so do know that you're going to lose your leaves a little bit early. They're not dying, they're just going dormant a little bit early. They like it cooler actually than what we have here, but very dependable trees, very easy tree to deal with, and very good shape. So those are the cherries. Those are kind of some of the first, to bloom trees here. Those are the ones we notice in the spring the most. Another one that I'd like to talk about that I think I can find, that's an underused tree that you may not have even ever known about before. It's going to be back off in here. Let's go. All right, right here. Let's move this out of the way. This is a purple leaf plum, by the way. Beautiful purple foliage throughout the season, beautiful blooms in the spring. They've already bloomed this year, so done with that, but a nice white bloom amongst purple foliage. That's always pretty. But the tree I wanted you to see is called Styrax. Get in here, Tyler. Get this picture. Japanese snowbell is a common name of this plant. Now, as it says, it's about 25 to 30 foot tree. It's fairly slow to get there. It is not a very fast growing tree whatsoever, but it's another small one for a front yard area, or maybe like, you know, if you have a bed that's outside of your home that's a little bit further away from the home, maybe on the corner of it where you've made a, you know, created a bed or something, that can go fairly close to your home. This is loaded with little white blooms. There's not a lot, they're not big and showy, but there's a whole bunch of just tiny little blooms that just create this huge white show on this plant. It's a good little tree, and it's, like I said, most people don't even know about it. So I've mentioned it because they got multiple buds. I mean, probably 1,000 on this one little tree of all these little bitty buds that are in here, that are going to open up to a nice white, just beautiful show. One thing I love about this tree that's kind of random, but I think it's cool, is that whenever they drop their petals, they fall beneath the plant and create this just litter of blooms that are below the plant, and I think that's just a really pretty scene. So definitely worth a grow, something you've probably never heard of, but you need to think about it because it's a pretty little plant. This also comes in cultivars of pink varieties. This one, like I said, the typical ones are just white, but we do offer pink ones as well, which I think I like a little bit more than most. So, cool little tree, underused. So, let's see, where are we going to go from here? We've also got plenty, what else we got in here? There's some, oh, I got to show you this tree. So we're going to start moving now into maybe some larger growing trees. What I've talked about so far is more or less in that 20 to 30 foot range. Good for a front yard scenario, good for a bed close to the home. But now let's move on to some larger growing trees. One of my favorites is coming on in here. This is Dawn Redwood. D-A-W-N, Dawn Redwood. Metasequoia. So metasequoia, meta meaning kind of false sequoia. It looks very similar to the giant sequoias out in California. It is a deciduous conifer, which is fairly rare here. We only have really 2 conifers that grow here in Middle Tennessee that are deciduous, and that's going to be Dawn Redwood, and it's going to be bald cypress, which I can show you next. When I say deciduous conifer, it's a cone-bearing plant that drops its needles. Pretty rare for that to happen. So this does not stay evergreen as much as you would think it would. It does not. But this is a fast-growing conifer. It can take wet areas very well. And it's just got almost prehistoric look to it. And I say that word because this is prehistoric. This plant lived with dinosaurs. They thought it was extinct. I believe I've read they found it in, I think, Japan or China. In like the 40s, like 1940 something. They rediscovered it, and then ever since then it's been back into the trade, and it's just a beautiful plant. The needle, or the foliage is just soft, especially this time of year when they emerge. And it grows pretty fast. That's the thing. Conifers aren't known for growing all that fast, but this one is. This plant can get huge. I think the champion in our state, I believe I've read, is somewhere along the lines of 138 feet or something like that. I believe it's at the Ellington Ag Center. I've actually seen it, got eyes on it. Huge tree, but just a specimen. Absolutely fantastic. So worth a grow for sure. If you got a pond, it looks great next to a pond. Looks just great out in the yard. Either way, it's worth a grow. One of my favorites, the exfoliating bark, the stair-step kind of approach to the branching, just really pretty. There's golden varieties now that are just light up with this gold foliage. And then also fall color on these is really nice as well. It goes this kind of, it's kind of a hard color to describe. It's almost reddish, brownish, tan. When the light hits it, it really lights up. So good fall color as well on this tree. Large growing plant. Really fantastic. It's worth a grow. As I was talking earlier, I was talking about bald cypress. Bald cypress is very closely related to Dawn Redwood, and Bald cypress is the state tree of Louisiana. You've probably seen the trees that are growing in the swamps. They literally can grow in water. What they do is to get oxygen to their root system, they'll send up those, what we call knees, that come out of the swamps in Louisiana. And you've probably seen that, all the knees on the trees out there. Those are all bald cypress. And like I said, they can handle water. They don't have to be planted next to water, but they can be planted right in water and be just fine and live there well. So I got one over here actually that's really cool. This is how they emerge. Super soft foliage. Looks like it should be at the bottom of the ocean or something. This specific cultivar is called Rise and Fall. Hence the name. It kind of goes up and then it kind of comes down. So it's almost got a weeping habit, which is rare for a bald cypress. Most bald cypress are just very large growing trees, 70 foot or better, up to 100 foot. And even bigger with age. But this one here is a little bit different because it's got a weeping habit. It's something that's pretty rare. I want to get one of these for my house so bad. It's absolutely stunning, and this spring emergence of this soft foliage is just absolutely beautiful. So worth a grow. Come on out here and get you one of these. It's very rare. You'll be one of the only people to have one. And stick it out in the yard and see what it does. I'd love to know, because I love to just see as plants grow, as they age, what they look like and what they do. So come on out and find you one of these. I think you'll like it. All right, moving on. What else do we have? Okay, let's talk about this tree right here while we're here. This one is just emerging with its new spring growth. This is an autumn blaze maple. It's a red maple. Autumn blaze is by far probably our best-selling maple. Now, as we all know, maples, they're prized for their fall color. We don't really think about flower power with the maples. They do bloom in the spring. You just don't notice it very much. But this is a very fast-growing maple. That's why it's our best seller, I think. It grows extremely fast. It creates a nice just shade tree. You can get up to, into that 40, 50 foot range in height. And then also the width is fairly similar. It's a very wide canopy, excellent just shade tree. Just something that's gonna throw you some shade in the yard if you got a hot spot, need some shade over a bench, something like that. Autumn blaze is a good plant for that. Fall color is really, really red, which is nice to see. It's quick to get there. It's beautiful red, and like I said, it's a good tree. I mean, we sell the full out of autumn blaze maple. Not so much in the spring, but as the fall comes on, we come out and we just load up with maples because a lot of people want them and they want to see that fall color. So autumn blaze, like I said, best seller, but we sell a lot of different maples out here. And this one's just a good one because of its speed. We do sell some sugar maples as well. Sugar is a little bit different in their fall color is more in that yellow to orange. They're a little bit slower to grow, but they still get just as big. We sell those as well. You can find them out here pretty much most of the time. So done with the maples. Let's see, where are we at? Oh, right behind me here, I've got a river birch. Typically, river birch comes as a clump form, so we've got 3 different stems in the same pot. Most of them are that way. We do sell them as single stem, but for the most part, you're going to see them in a clump. The reason people like river birch so much is the exfoliating bark down here. As this ages, the plant gets a lot more white, and it's exfoliating. One little fun fact about river birch is that this bark right here, the stuff that peels off of it, is extremely flammable. So just so you know that, if you get a whole bunch of this, or you're in a tight spot and you need a fire or something and you see some river birch, you can peel some of this bark off here and it'll take a spark and it'll just light up really quick. So something kind of cool about river birch. Another good thing about river birch is that it grows super fast. It's just really, I mean, you plant one and you'll see within a few years, you'll be amazed at how much they really grow. Now, one downside to that, which I will mention, is that usually fast-growing trees are fairly dirty trees. This plant throws so many sticks and stems so quickly that not all of them can leaf out, mainly the interior ones. You get a lot of dieback as the years go on, and you got a lot of stems that just break off and fall. So do know that if you're going to be mowing around a river birch, there's going to be a fair amount of cleanup with it. I say this because my mother has a river birch at her house, and she has to pick up sticks all the time before she can mow. So just know that, but the bark is beautiful. As it ages, it gets more white. Leaves are small. But other than that, it's a pretty good tree. We call it river birch, hence the name. It can also live in a very wet site. It's okay. You need to watch this plant as the summer. If you plant one in the spring, you really need to watch it through the summertime. Don't let it dry out on you because it will drop its foliage early. So keep it wet. You almost can't keep it wet enough on the first season, and then as it latches in, it's going to live just fine without you having to water. But on years of drought, if we have that in the summer, you need to keep an eye on it and don't let it go dry on you. All right, good old river birch. What else we got over here? Oh, come here and look at this, Tyler. Here. So this is a magnolia tree. Now, most of you think of magnolias as big, large, evergreen, white blooming plants, which for the most part, that's what we have, our southern magnolias here. I can show you those here in a little bit. But we also sell a number of deciduous magnolias. Deciduous means they drop their leaves in the wintertime, and this is one of those. This is a different variety called Elizabeth, which is a yellow blooming deciduous magnolia. I'm sure you've all noticed and probably seen around town, probably about, I don't know, 3 weeks ago to a month ago. Let's see if I can get you. There's kind of some blooms opening up. It's kind of a soft yellow. It's not true, and it's kind of whitish a little bit as well. But what you've probably noticed is the other deciduous magnolias that are the purple growing variety, and that's the ones we all call tulip magnolias, because they have a bloom that is that really pretty purple that's up on a almost tulip shape, so why we call them that, kind of up like this. So those are the ones that were blooming around town, like I said, about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And they're super showy plants. Not a crazy big tree. Most of them only get about 25 foot with age. They take a while to get there. And, you know, it's just a really showy early spring blooming plant. One downside to deciduous magnolia, I'll go ahead and say, is y'all know Middle Tennessee. If you lived here long enough, you know that we have a lot of times late frosts. Not always good for plant life around here. We had one, I guess it was last week or 2 weeks ago, I believe it was. Had a pretty cold night, a pretty cold couple of nights, and that tends to mess with deciduous magnolias, and these are no different. These actually took a hit, you can see. They've bounced back a little bit. Some of the other buds weren't open yet, so they're still blooming, but what you can see is the damage left over from the late frost that we had. All of these blooms that were out got kind of whacked by that frost. So just know if you're going to be buying one, there's nothing you can do about it. You're going to have to, that's Mother Nature for you. If we have a late frost, they're probably going to succumb to that. So if they're in full show, when we get that late frost, you're going to see some damage. Not going to kill the plant, just going to, you know, lose the blooms for that season. So, deciduous magnolia, pretty cool plant. Let me show you something here. If you're in a tight spot, or you need a long row of something, or you want to, you need something that's thin. Let's talk about slender silhouette sweet gum. It's been an excellent cultivar that came out, and we sell a lot of them. So these are just emerging. This is sweet gum. Sweet gum has a very much maple-ish leaf, very palmate in shape, kind of like your hand. And these are just emerging, so they're nowhere near the size they're going to be. The leaves are going to open up and swell a lot bigger, about the size of my hand. But what you notice is the vertical habit of these plants. Look at them. It's just, I mean, thin all the way up to the top, and the plant doesn't get much wider than this. I mean, it does get wider, don't get me wrong, but it stays very, very thin. So if you need something, like I said, lining the driveway at the corner of your home, and you're okay with the deciduous plant, one that loses its leaves, then slender silhouette's the plant for you. I've seen this plant all the way up to 30 foot tall. With it almost like 3 to 4 feet width. That's it. I mean, it is really good for that. So using this plant in like maybe a tripled up scenario where you're creating a ring or something, like using 3 in a triangle to go up to make a bigger effect, that's a cool way to use this plant as well. So like I said, tight spot, skinny, you need something skinny, slender silhouette is really pretty plant for you. What else we got here? We got our black gums just waking up. I don't know if y'all know about black gums. Nyssa sylvatica is the name of this plant. It gets very large. It's just starting to emerge. The new growth comes out red like this. And then also the fall color is what's prized for the wildfire black gums. It is a brilliant, brilliant red in the fall. Whenever the leaves are starting to change, black gum is one that you don't notice till you see it in the fall. But once you do, you're like, whoa, that's a cool plant. This can get up to 70 foot tall, very, very large growing shade tree. Good plant, underused. It's worth a shot in the yard because it's very hardy. Also can take a lot of water. And like I said, the fall show is really, really brilliant. Here's some of our red buds again, y'all. Look at them, just full show. Really, really pretty plants. All right, what else we got? Haven't talked about the oaks really yet. We have so many native oaks here. We sell a number of them. One of my favorites probably is going to be the Nuttall oak. It's a good alternative to pin oak. I don't know if you know, you'll probably know pin oak. What happens with pin oak is that as it grows, the stems do this funny thing to where they go out and then they want to turn down at the bottom, and then the top kind of goes more up like a regular oak tree. It's just kind of what pin oak does. So Nuttall is a better alternative. I think the UT Extension Agency put out a little research paper about that, about how Nuttall doesn't do that near as bad, where the lower limbs don't go down. They'll kind of stand up with it. So using Nuttall oak is a good one. Very stately tree. All oaks are very just, you know, long-lived, hardy trees. They're not all that fast to grow for the most part. Oaks are going to be a little bit slower, but very dependable, going to outlive you for sure, and get very large. So there you go, there's some oaks. Let me show you a couple trees that can live in like kind of urban areas, ones that high pollutant areas around the street. If you're really in the downtown city and need just a really hardy tree, let me show you a couple over here. This beautiful specimen here. This one right here is a Chinese elm tree. Chinese lacebark elm, people call it. It's got, not yet, it's still a fairly young tree, but elms grow very fast around here. And they've got this exfoliating bark. It's hard to see yet, it's not doing it yet, but almost as it ages, it gets this almost camouflage looking bark to it, with this little brown patches in it. It's just really cool. As it gets older, it shows that a lot more, and it's a very, very hardy tree. Like I said, the pollutants don't really get it all that bad. It's very much used in city parks, you know, like I said, areas with lots of traffic around it. So good plant to use, very, very hardy. And it grows very fast, which is nice too. You get a small tree and it's big before you know it. So cool plant. This is a big one here. What else we got? Another hardy tree. It's going to be something like this right here. You've probably never heard of this. It's called green vase zelkova. Japanese zelkova. It's a very easy tree to grow. Grows, you know, pretty fast. Nice round canopy, single stem. It's got bark almost like a cherry tree. It's even got leaves almost like a cherry tree. Very serrated. And this was one of the first trees in college I actually ever identified. It's a pretty cool little plant. Planted in a grove. Gets 30, 40 foot tall, with a very similar spread, round crown. Good plant for just a bad area, you know, in the city, right around concrete, whatever. It's going to live in that scenario very well. So there you go. Probably never heard of zelkova, but it does exist and it lives well here. Here's some more bald cypress I was talking about earlier. This is kind of the earlier I showed you a weeping variety. This one's just a very upright growing conifer. So bald cypress, very nice. Let me get back in here and show you one more. These beautiful plants right here is called a Persian ironwood. Another one you may not have heard of, hence the name ironwood. It's got very solid bark, very just rigid. You can't barely tug on them. They don't bend, they just break if you're gonna mess with them. But it's a cool plant. It's got great fall color. The fall color is almost odd to explain as well. It's kind of coppery, reddish orange. It's kind of how the sun hits it is kind of the way is what kind of dictates the color. But the spring emergence on this plant is so pretty. The green is just excellent. And it's worth a grow. It's very slow to grow. They don't get big quick at all, but they can get fairly large. So do know that, but do know you're gonna have to wait a little while for it to get big. But just a really stately tree that's underused, I think. So, Persian ironwood. All right. Well, so we've walked just a little bit through the tree lot. I mean, literally I showed y'all maybe 5% of the trees that we sell. So it's worth coming out here, walking around with us, getting off in these trees and just seeing what we got. You can find some good gems in here. Like I said, we can help you picking out anything you want. So when it comes to trees, I could talk about it all day, but really I want you to just come on out and see us. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.